All right, everyone. We are now joined by Dr. Wade Gilbert. Wade, thanks so much for being here. I know you're on your sabbatical right now, so thanks for taking the time out of your learning and joining us here today. Really excited to have you on to talk about the importance of values and philosophy in our coaching. And to start, we just want to open it up a little bit and have you speak on why values and philosophy are important for coaches to have as they go along in their coaching.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me as part of your program, and it's nice to see you both. And it's interesting you said in the beginning there, take some time out of your learning on your sabbatical to be a part of this, but this is learning, right? Every time, one of my favorite quotes is, when one person teaches, two people learn. And always open to learning whenever you have these types of interactions. So I'm going to get as much or more out of this than you guys will. But in terms of values and philosophy, I think what I've seen over my career is it's pretty standard, whether it's a coach education program, a coaching clinic, a coaching book. Usually chapter 1 is coaching philosophy. And I'm less convinced that you need to have a formal written philosophy. I know some people kind of raise their eyebrows when I say that, but it's important to think about it, and it's important to talk about it, particularly if you're a part of a staff, so that it's or with coaching peers, people you're close with. Your athletes don't necessarily need to know about your philosophy because you live your philosophy. You don't need to tell them your philosophy. You are the message. And that's really become clear to me too. And I remember what really struck out to me a few years ago. I was talking to someone about John Wooden, a legendary basketball coach and voted coach of the 20th century. And I had a chance to work with him a little bit and stay involved with him for many years. And one of the things he's most well known for is his pyramid of success, which is essentially a graphical display of his philosophy and his values. And it's, you see this all over the world. And I was talking to one of his players, and he said, we never saw the pyramid. He never talked about the pyramid. And I found that very interesting because he articulated it was for him. Like it was important for him to be grounded and have a very clear understanding of what he valued and felt was really important. But he didn't need to go and give lectures and presentations to his players about it. He lived it. He held himself accountable to living the blocks of that pyramid every day. That was his challenge. That was his test. And then another example came to mind just recently, a volleyball coach that I work with here, college coach, very successful as a player, was best player in the country, national team player, national champion 2 times. And he was part of a volleyball program in college that was the best program in the country for many years. And we were talking about this now that he's a coach, what's your philosophy? And he said, well, now that you're asking me to think about these things, my coach in college, who was the John Wooden of volleyball, a guy named Marv Dunphy, we never had a team meeting in 4 years that I was there. I don't ever remember him telling us his philosophy or his values or even program values, but you knew what they were because they were alive in the gym every single day. And if you exhibited a behavior that was not consistent with how we operate here, what our values are, you would know about it right away. A senior player, very rarely would it be the coach, but usually a senior player, a teammate, would hold you accountable and put you in line and, let you know very clearly that that's not acceptable here. That's not how we operate.
Yeah. So, what always strikes out to me is also what you have been mentioning now is very new for me, because overall is that, especially that that you don't have to tell your players that your philosophy, you have to live your philosophy. I think that's a great key takeaway for myself as well. But once as a coach, and what you have been speaking also a lot in your book, is that this continuous reflection on your philosophy and on your values. And the first step is to establish them and then keep reflecting on them. And then once you move on a little bit the coaching ladder, it takes, you get to know more people, and a lot of different circumstances can influence you. So as a first of all, as a human being, and then as a coach, how do you make sure that you stay loyal to your values?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, and this is now me kind of speaking anecdotally, reflecting, you know, I'm in my 50s now, and I've had opportunities to interact with thousands of coaches all over the world. And so just kind of reflecting on these types of questions and my own values. And then also thinking back to people like Coach Wooden, you know, who lived to be 99 and coached, you know, his whole life, really. I mean, formally 40 years, but his whole life, he was always coaching someone. And I don't know that you ever truly have a final version of your philosophy and your values. It's constantly, at least with the best that I've been around, you're never complete. Like, you're never finished, right? You're always growing, changing, evolving. The world around you is constantly changing, evolving. So to think that you would somehow get to a point where you got it, and I know exactly what my values and my philosophy are now, I think is a bit naive, because tomorrow you're a different person and you're interacting with different people, and they're different too, right? So I think having a sense of purpose that informs your values and your philosophy. So becoming more and more clear about why you do what you do. You know, why do I care so much about coaching and helping other people and seeing people succeed and grow? And that informs your values, what you value, and how you decisions that you make. I mean, you can also see people's values and their philosophy in the decisions that they make. So again, it comes back, for me, it comes back to trying to, in a sense, align your decisions and your behaviors each day with things that are important to you. So for example, you know, I'm coaching ice hockey right now, U14 kids, and they had a rough game the other day, and that, you know, they're growing, they're making mistakes, for kids, good days, bad days, but they had a really bad game. And so we're me and the two other coaches are walking from the bench to across the ice to the locker room. The kids are in the locker room, and the kids, right away, the head coach starts going in, not berating the kids, he's a great coach, but started identifying all the things we need to work on. And so, you know, the things that we're not doing well. And it was in that moment that I kind of, actually, after we walked out of the dressing room, I reflected on that moment, and I thought that wasn't really true to our values. That was reactive, and that was normal. That's what you would expect. You have a bad game, coach is going to come in the room and tell you all the things we did wrong, right? But if you really value connection, development, you need space in those moments to kind of pause. And I didn't catch myself. I was too emotional as well, right? So I didn't catch it. And so really what we should have done before we went in the locker room is just take another minute, even 30 seconds, say, hey, before we go in the room, what do we want to say, and why? Not just what, but why? Well, we need to tell them, you know, but their passing was horrendous today and puck control was awful. Okay, but why do we need to tell them that? Do you not think they saw that? I mean, maybe they didn't, maybe they're not aware of that, but, you know, have that little bit of conversation before you go and make a decision or take an action. And that you don't need to necessarily formally, pull out, well, our philosophy says this or our values are this. I mean, but having that conversation in those moments will bring your values to life, give you an opportunity to just quickly pause and reflect, well, is this really what I'm about to say or do, is this really consistent with why I do this and what I think they need right now? Or is it just what we always do? So I think the more you can kind of catch yourself in those moments, and you have to, another one of Coach Wooden's favorite sayings was, be quick, but don't hurry. So there's a moment you have to act, you have to do something, you have to make a decision. They're waiting for you in the locker room, right? But if you can do it, or if you have a staff, a group of people, or even if it's just two of you, say, hey, before we make this decision, or before we walk in there, why are we going to do what we are going to do? And that is, in a sense, kind of a values conversation in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because I think I see that a lot of in myself as a young coach early on, reacting more than just taking a step back and reflecting first and having those conversations. This has me thinking of two questions. And so I'll ask one, and then I'll wait for you to answer that one and move on to the second one. The first one is, you mentioned that the philosophy is something that always changes. It's always evolving, and it changes the more you reflect and the more you think about your coaching and what's important to you. My question is there a right time to be changing your philosophy? Because, I think if you go in with your athletes and you're changing up all the time, and you're changing what's important to you every week or every month, and it can be quite confusing for the athlete. So is there a kind of right time to sit down and really think about, okay, hey, this is what I want to do differently, and then maybe just, be quick but don't hurry with changing how you coach and your philosophy and things like that?
Yeah, I think the best coaches are constantly, it's incremental changes. There's like a big change to how you approach coaching. You're right, probably would be best to address in the off season, where you have a bit more time and space to reflect on it and test it in a sense. So this idea of a virtual test. So I have these ideas that I think might be appropriate or work better. I won't know until I try them, right? So maybe I can try it incrementally, or with a specific athlete or in a specific drill or something, or part of a game or an exhibition game or something, that where the consequences are not, the consequences of failure, if it doesn't work out the way I thought it did, are not as significant. So we can conduct what I call these little virtual experiments, where we try things, we try out. It's like trying on clothes. I wonder what this will look like. Or even, just when you're adapting a recipe, think about, I always like analogies and metaphors, but, think about a recipe. So recipes get handed down from generation to generation, but there's a pretty standard way to bake a cake, right? Or to make a certain dish. But we all add our own kind of touch to it, right? A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. And we're constantly adapting that as our tastes change and our way of thinking change. So that's why I think, with a philosophy or values, there's probably going to be a core to that, which is really central to who I am and what I believe in. And so that wouldn't necessarily change, but the way I enact that definitely should change, because generational changes, athletes change. Maybe one year I'm coaching a travel team, the next year I'm coaching a house league team, or I'm coaching 20-year-olds, or I'm coaching 6-year-olds. So that's where I think the core wouldn't necessarily change too much, I would think, but the way I enact that probably is always changing.
Yeah. So the second part of that then is, what can really influence coaches to change? And I'm thinking specifically about, mentors, or just other coaches that you maybe not see as necessarily a mentor, but just someone that you can learn from. Because, there's the popular saying that the best coaches are good thieves, right? And stealing pieces from other coaches and things. Where's the balance between adding different pieces in from different coaches, but then also kind of finding your own authentic philosophy and values to yourself?
Yeah, I like that question too, because it reminds me of a study one of my graduate students did years and years ago. We were wondering at that time if there was one kind of common philosophy for really successful coaches. And we didn't have access to the best at the time, but we reviewed their biographies and their autobiographies, and these were some, you know, best coaches of all time in different professional sports. And sure enough, the common theme was authenticity. You hit on it. So be the best you. Don't try and be like John Wooden or you know, pick whatever coach you want, right? You've had lots of coaches on here, and whoever's, you know, Bill Belichick or Steve Kerr or whoever. So learn from them, listen to them, observe them. And also I found real strength and power in getting outside of coaching and sport. So a lot of the great coaches have been around, you know, they're very eclectic. They read history. They have some other passion outside of sport that helps nourish them and gives them balance, but it also helps stretch your way of thinking and your view on the world. And, you know, John Wooden, his library, his personal library was wasn't full of coaching books. He loved poetry. He loved history. Those were two things that he was constantly kind of digesting and devouring. And, you know, in my case, I love history. I love nature. You know, I'm music. So really eclectic. And now today, right, we can watch documentaries and podcasts. Like, there's unlimited access to things outside of sport that are easy to digest. So I think looking at being eclectic in a sense, like we all have our passions, right? Some people, everyone, if we went around a room, if there's a whole bunch of us in a room and, you know, I say, okay, what are you really passionate about? And everybody says, oh, I love sport, or I love hockey. Okay, but great. Outside of that, oh, I love race cars. Great. I love music. I play guitar. Awesome. So go deep into something else outside of sport and coaching, because what that does is it really keeps you in learner mode, and also expands your mental model, in a sense, your view of the world and of what's possible. And I'm always amazed at how, when you do that, how those ideas, you're not doing it with the purpose to get better as a coach or to refine my values or my philosophy as a coach, but it does make you a better coach, because those ideas, you know, subconsciously influence your way of thinking. And when I give you an example. So when I was working with Team Canada for the Tokyo Olympics, and I want to make sure we kind of had a theme for our journey and a mission. And we ended up settling on the Apollo 11 mission and moonshots, and making connections to Canada's role in that mission. And I never would have really come to that if I hadn't been eclectic in my reading and my learning. And so, you know, having read about, followed some astronauts and been curious about astronomy and things like that, all those things, then those things start to come back to you and say, oh yeah, I remember reading something about that. I didn't really make a big note about it at the time, but it's still in there, you know, like it's still part of you, and it still helps influence your thinking and your decision making. Then, of course, if you're doing that as a group, whether you're part of a learning group or you have a staff, now you're just accelerating that process.
So I feel like that we have been speaking now quite a lot about the impact, about the values, and the importance of having a coaching philosophy. And again, I really like that how you have been phrasing at the beginning, that the most essential part is that we actually live up our values. For example, as you have been saying as well, John Wooden never showed a pyramid of success. He just was living it up so much. And that's the reason why players bought into his coaching philosophy and into his values. And my next question is a little bit controversial. Is could you maybe describe, and maybe you also know of cases that where coaches have not identified their coaching philosophy and have not identified their core values, and how this actually can impact your daily interaction with the players you coach?
I think if you look in the media any day, right, around the world, especially in professional sport, and hockey has plenty of examples, we know, coaches who are very successful win Olympic gold medals and Stanley Cup championships and things like that. And then at some point, it falls apart and players come forward, and, you know, there's player abuse, or, you know, something went wrong. And I think that's where it's important. I think, again, I don't have research to support this, but I think in a lot of those cases, it's when those coaches deviated from those values that got them there in the first place. So that love of the game, that connection with the players, being one of the guys or one of the girls, you know, like when you first start, there's that enthusiasm and energy, and you want to connect, and you want to go on a journey together, and you want to do special things. And at some point that changes. Maybe it's the pressure to continually win, or external pressures, or issues in personal issues, right? And a lot of times you see when coaches falter, there's something underlying that, whether it's a drinking issue, or, you know, marital issues, or something. There's something else that kind of blinded them from their values, and they lost sight of those things that were important to them when they first started. And so I think you could probably look at most examples of scandals, or, you know, things like that in professional sport. And I'm just thinking of ice hockey in particular. We've had a lot over the last, just in professional sport, in the last 4 or 5 years. So, but then you look at the coaches who continually, like in basketball, like a Steve Kerr with the Golden State Warriors, or I guess you could find some examples in pro hockey too, maybe with, you know, the Tampa Bay Lightning, for example, right now, as a team that's, you know, having a lot of success. There seems to be a certain energy around the team. And I'll give you I met with an NHL coach just in the preseason here, and we talked a lot about, you know, what kind of experience they want that to have this year. And this was a team, I won't give away too much, but they're one of the best teams in the league right now, and they're surprising a lot of people. And who knows, right? We'll see what happens by the end of the season. But you can tell just from game one to now, when you watch them play, even you watch a game on TV, they're in every game. Even when they lose, it's a 1-goal game or an overtime. Like they never get blown out. There's an energy around the team. You can tell they're having fun. And I think with that particular coach, he understood that I need to lead, but I also need to allow them to have ownership of this experience. Like, that's a basic human need. People want to have some autonomy, right? They want to be led, but they want to have some autonomy as well. So there's certain values, I think, that if we understand human nature, so again, it's not a coaching issue, but just understanding people and what drives people, that should help inform our approach and the values that we want to live with our teams.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and I think that, you know, that's where the value of the research and the kind of philosophy behind human nature and human kind of needs and basic needs, as you mentioned, that and the kind of work behind the need supportive coaching, and how much that has been researched in the past, you know, 10-15 years has been, I think, really instrumental in changing a lot of coaches' behaviors. I have just kind of one final question for you, and it's relevant for the program here, because every year we bring in, you know, a class of 25 students, and you know, maybe 15 to 20 of them are brand new at coaching, And now we have this new curriculum where the first class that they do is called establishing a coaching philosophy. So my question for you is, because all over the world, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of new coaches every year. What is that piece of advice that you would give to new coaches when they're just starting out and they're just trying to start finding their values and their philosophy?
Yeah, that's thanks for sharing that. That's a pretty interesting and standard way of doing things. Like we think step one is our philosophy, but to me, I think step one is moments. So let's start with coaching, because philosophy is kind of abstract. So you can still have that, the same course and same title and everything else, but that to me, that type of clinic course experience should be about the decisions in the moments. So let's not start by, in 500 words or less, let's write our coaching philosophy. It's just really abstract and kind of theoretical. And let's start with, here's a decision. Your team just lost 10-0. You're walking across the ice. You're about to go in the room and address the team. What do you say? There's your philosophy right there. You just learned that one of your players broke a team rule, and you're about to take a road trip. You're meeting with the team in 3 minutes. What are you going to do? Like, put them in those specific. A player comes up to you after a game and says, "Coach, I can't play on that line. I hate those guys. They never pass to me. What are you going to do?" Right? So build out all these scenarios, and you do it sport by sport, right? And it doesn't matter. You don't have to, like, you could use a curling example or bobsled or boxing, because it's people. You're coaching people in sport environments. So make that class, even the first few, just about what are you going to do? What would you do? What would you do? And all these, and then have people reflect and write a philosophy statement. Say, okay, so think about how you respond to all these situations, or how you would like to respond to all these situations. What does that say about what you value as a coach and a person, and what your philosophy encompasses? And I also like the idea of putting it less in words and more in images. Like pick a metaphor, analogy, an image. So display your philosophy. So like Wooden used this pyramid. A lot of coaches use a pyramid across all different sports. I've seen that, but some have buildings and trucks, and like it could be anything. Just like something, a flow chart. If you had to represent your philosophy graphically or in an image, what would it look like? And what are the components of that?
Yeah. So
I think activities like that really bring your philosophy to life in real coaching moments.
Yeah. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have here today. But Dr. Gilbert, thanks a lot for joining us, and I think it was a really inspiring 30 minutes here. So thank you for the time, and thank you for your thoughtful answers. And enjoy the rest of your sabbatical, and we'll definitely be in touch, and we'll definitely try to get you on the podcast to try to keep diving deeper into this stuff with you.
No, thank you both, and really appreciate the work you're doing for the coaching profession. We're better off because of your work. Thanks. Keep it up.